Imagine a country largely in the headlines for conflicts, threats, and its nuclear ambitions. A country that many associate with the darkest corners of geopolitics. Yet its role in history and in the Bible is far more significant than we realize, and its destiny has already been foretold. Yes, Iran, known in ancient times as Persia, plays a much deeper role in biblical history than most people know. It's not just about its current struggles or its modern-day politics. The story of Persia goes back thousands of years, stretching all the way to the book of Genesis and even into the prophecies of the end times in Revelation. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may change everything you thought you knew about this country and its divine destiny. It all begins with a fresh start for humanity after the Great Flood. The Bible doesn't just mention Persia, it reveals its deep connection to God's plan, from the creation of nations to the prophecies surrounding the end of days. And Persia's involvement doesn't stop in ancient history. It continues to this day, and its prophetic role may surprise you. The story of Persia's roots begins in the book of Genesis, a time when the world was being repopulated after the flood. God gave humanity a fresh start, and Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the fathers of new nations. If we flip to Genesis chapter 10, we see a map of the world's nations forming. From these 3 sons, new tribes and nations spread across the earth. 2 of those nations would become key players in what we now know as Iran: the Medes and the Elamites. The Medes, descendants of Japheth's son Madai, lived in the mountainous regions of northern Iran. They were tough, independent mountaineers, fiercely organized, and known for their resilience. These tribes would form the heart of ancient Persia. The Elamites, descendants of Shem, settled in the fertile land of southwest Iran, near the Persian Gulf. But the Elamites weren't just a minor tribe. They were a powerful force, and in Genesis 14, we see their first significant appearance in history, when they lead an invasion against Canaan. In Genesis 14, we read about the Bible's first great international conflict. 4 eastern kings, including Chedorlaomer of Elam, invade Canaan, plundering cities and enslaving people. Among the captured was Lot, Abraham's nephew. But here's where it gets interesting. Abraham didn't just sit back and watch his family be enslaved. He gathered a small army of just 318 trained servants and pursued the invaders. Against all odds, Abraham defeated the kings of the east, rescuing Lot and sending a powerful message. No empire, no matter how great, can stand against those who have the favor of God. The Elamites, though defeated, didn't disappear. Their influence continued to grow over time. They became one of the key tribes that would merge into the Persian Empire. And it wasn't just about battles. God had a plan for them that would echo throughout history. As time went on, Persia, then known as a land of smaller, independent tribes, started to unite. It wasn't just through force, but also through God's divine plan. 2 major prophecies about Persia were declared by the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah. In one of the most surprising prophecies of the Old Testament, God declared through Isaiah that Persia would be an instrument to punish Babylon, the mighty empire that had destroyed Jerusalem and burned down its temple. This was a powerful prophecy, but it didn't stop there. God also revealed that Persia, through a pagan king yet unborn, would become the instrument of Israel's liberation by sending the Israelites back to Jerusalem and funding the rebuilding of the temple. But here's the kicker. God not only foretold the rise of Persia, he even named the king who would lead the charge. More than 150 years before his birth, God called this Persian king by name. His name was Cyrus. In the 8th century BC, a significant event occurred when the Medes united under a king named Deioces. who established the first capital of the Medo-Persian kingdom at Ecbatana. His grandson, Sargon, further reformed the army, and Persia began to emerge as a major force in the region. But it wasn't just about military might, it was about divine timing. As God had foretold, Persia's rise wasn't only about revenge against Babylon, it was about fulfilling God's purpose to restore his people. As Persia's power grew, the prophecy about King Cyrus was set to unfold. The mighty Babylonian Empire, which had once destroyed Jerusalem and enslaved Israel, was about to face a new foe. This prophecy would be fulfilled in the most unexpected way. And Cyrus, the Persian king, would not only defeat Babylon, but he would also set God's people free. The prophecy regarding Cyrus wasn't just a dream, it was a divine declaration that came to fruition in the most remarkable way. The Persian Empire, under Cyrus, wasn't just about conquering lands, it was about fulfilling God's plan for Israel. When the time came, Cyrus rose to power, uniting the Medes and Persians. He became the ruler of one of the greatest empires of the ancient world, and God used him to bring about a drastic shift in the destiny of Israel. Cyrus, a pagan king, was prophesied by name more than 150 years before he was born. Isaiah, the prophet, declared in Isaiah 45:1, "This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him, and to strip kings of their armor, to open doors before him, so that gates will not be shut." Remarkably, this prophecy came true to the letter. Cyrus not only conquered the Babylonian Empire, but was also the one to decree that the Jews could return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, something no one had imagined possible at the time. The prophecy was realized when Babylon, the mighty empire that had taken Israel captive, fell without a conventional battle. The details of this incredible event are detailed in the book of Daniel, when the Persian army, led by Cyrus, infiltrated the city by diverting the Euphrates River. The gates of Babylon were unlocked, and the Persians entered the city without a fight. That very night, King Belshazzar, the ruler of Babylon, was slain. It was an event that fulfilled God's judgment upon Babylon. The Jews who had been exiled for 70 years in Babylon were given the green light to return to their homeland. But Cyrus didn't just allow the return. He funded the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, sending the Jewish leaders back with royal support to restore the place where God's name dwelled. It was an astonishing act of mercy and divine intervention. However, not all visions of Persia were filled with redemption. The prophet Daniel had another vision about the future of Persia, and this one was much darker. In this vision, Daniel saw 4 beasts rising from the chaotic waters of the earth. The second beast was a massive bear, raised on one side, with 3 ribs in its teeth. This bear represented the empire that would come after Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire. What stands out in this vision is the bear's asymmetry. One side of the bear was raised higher than the other, a symbol that Persia would eventually overpower Media and dominate the empire. The 3 ribs in the bear's mouth symbolized Persia's 3 great conquests: Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. This vision came to life as Persia's empire expanded, conquering vast territories. But Persia's reign didn't last forever. As Daniel's vision continued, he saw another beast, this time a goat, swift and aggressive. The goat knocked the bear down and trampled it underfoot. This goat represented Greece, and its appearance signified the inevitable fall of Persia to the armies of Alexander the Great. Despite the looming threats from future empires like Greece, Persia's days of splendor were at their peak during the reign of King Xerxes I, Ahasuerus. The mighty Persian Empire stretched from India to Ethiopia. and its capital, Susa, stood as a testament to its grandeur. It was in the city of Susa where one of the most miraculous and unexpected events in the Bible unfolded. King Xerxes, in a moment of pride, summoned his queen, Vashti, to display her beauty before his court. When Vashti refused, the king banished her and sought a new queen. A search began, and a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known later as Esther, was brought into the palace. Esther was chosen, and she became the new queen of Persia. Esther's story is one of the most unexpected miracles in the Bible. An orphaned Jew became the queen of the greatest empire on earth. But Esther's rise to power was more than just a royal tale. It was the unfolding of God's providence. As queen, Esther was faced with an unimaginable challenge. A man named Haman, who had risen to the highest ranks of the Persian court, harbored a deep hatred for the Jewish people. When Esther's cousin, Mordecai, refused to bow before Haman, it set off a chain of events that led Haman to plot the annihilation of all Jews in the Persian Empire. Haman convinced the king to issue a decree ordering the destruction of the Jews, and the fate of an entire people hung in the balance. But Esther didn't shrink away from this perilous moment. With courage and wisdom, she approached the king uninvited, a dangerous act, as the king could have had her executed on the spot. However, God granted Esther favor, and the king extended his scepter to her. It was at this moment that Esther revealed Haman's plot to the king, and in a dramatic twist, Haman, the enemy of the Jews, was executed on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. But even then, the law could not be undone. So Esther and Mordecai devised a bold plan to grant the Jews the right to defend themselves, which resulted in their ultimate triumph. In a stunning reversal, Persia, the empire that had once been a source of oppression for the Jews, became the fortress that defended God's people. The story of Esther highlights how Persia, though often seen as an adversary, was used by God to protect his people from destruction. Persia's influence doesn't fade away after the days of Esther. In fact, it resurfaces in one of the most well-known stories in the New Testament, the birth of Jesus Christ. We often hear the story of the Magi, the wise men who followed the star to Bethlehem to find the newborn King of the Jews. But what many don't realize is that these men were likely from Persia. The term Magi refers to learned astronomers and priests who came from the East. Their journey wasn't just about seeking a king, it was about fulfilling a prophecy passed down through generations. These Magi were well versed in the prophecies of Daniel, who had served in the courts of Babylon and Persia and had prophesied about the coming Messiah. It's likely that the Magi, having studied these ancient prophecies, recognized the significance of the star that appeared in the sky and knew the time had come for the Messiah's arrival. The gifts they brought, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were rich with meaning. Gold symbolized Jesus' kingship, frankincense represented his divinity, and myrrh foreshadowed his death. In a powerful moment of prophecy fulfilled, these Persian wise men were the first to honor the newborn king. But Persia's story in the Bible doesn't end with the arrival of the Messiah. In fact, the nation of Persia, known today as Iran, has a crucial role to play in the events leading up to the end of days. In Ezekiel's prophecies, Persia is once again mentioned, but this time as part of a darker coalition. As we move further into biblical prophecy, Persia's role shifts dramatically. It's no longer a nation that serves as an instrument of liberation or a defender of God's people. In the prophecies of Ezekiel, Persia is now part of a coalition of nations that will rise up against Israel in the final days, a terrifying moment in the battle for the soul of humanity. In Ezekiel 38, we encounter the prophecy of Gog and Magog. Gog, the leader of a great coalition, will rally nations from all corners of the earth to attack Israel. Among these nations, Persia is specifically mentioned as a key participant. Ezekiel writes, "Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him. Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." Then he goes on to name the nations that will ally with Gog: Persia, along with Cush, modern-day Sudan, Put, likely Libya, and other nations surrounding Israel. This alliance will surge like a storm, covering the land with troops, and Israel will be under siege. Ezekiel describes it as a moment where the world will seem to be on the brink of disaster. The armies of Gog and Magog, including Persia, will come against Israel with overwhelming force. But the prophecy doesn't end in destruction for Israel. God himself will intervene. Ezekiel 38, 18-23 paints a dramatic scene where God's judgment falls on these attacking nations. Earthquakes will shake the ground, fire will consume them, and confusion will strike their armies. In the end, God's glory will shine forth, and it will be clear to all that He is the Lord. This moment in prophecy is perhaps one of the most chilling in the Bible. The once redeemed Persia, now aligned against God's people, will face His judgment. But this isn't just a prediction of war, it's a warning. It shows that no nation, no matter how powerful, can stand against the will of God. Despite its former role as a deliverer, Persia will play a part in the final assault on Israel. This transition is a stark shift in the nation's trajectory. Persia, which once helped rebuild the temple and even supported Israel's return to their homeland, will now be part of a coalition that defies God's plan. As Ezekiel's prophecy unfolds, the armies of Gog and Magog will come against Israel, and Persia will be in the thick of it. The Bible is clear. Persia's rebellion against God will lead to divine retribution. The consequences will be severe. Persia, along with the other nations in this alliance, will face God's wrath in a way that will be remembered throughout history. This may seem like the tragic end for Persia, a nation that once had such a significant role in the story of God's people. Yet, even in judgment, there is still a glimmer of hope. As we read in the book of Jeremiah, "In the last days, I will restore the fortunes of Elam." Jeremiah 49:39. This is an astonishing prophecy. While Persia will face God's judgment in the final days, there is still the possibility of restoration. In the midst of such destruction and judgment, we are offered a glimpse of something remarkable: redemption. God, through the prophet Jeremiah, promises that after the judgment of Persia, there will come a time when He will restore the people of Elam, the ancient heartland of Persia. Jeremiah 49:39 states, "But in the latter days I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord." Even after Persia's role in the coalition against Israel, God declares that He will not abandon this ancient nation. There will be a future for Persia. In the final days, after the judgment and destruction of Gog and Magog, God leaves the door open for Persia's restoration. This prophecy is powerful because it shows that even in the darkest moments, God's grace is never fully withdrawn. Persia, once an instrument of redemption and a protector of God's people, may find itself judged in the end, but God has not completely forsaken her. In fact, this future restoration suggests that even the most wayward nations can one day return to God. What does this mean for the modern nation of Iran? Iran, a country that has been the subject of controversy, fear, and political tension, carries within its history a deep connection to the divine plan of God. From being an instrument of God's will, to help rebuild the temple, to playing a role in the Messiah's arrival. Persia's legacy is intertwined with both divine judgment and mercy. If we look at this prophecy through the lens of the present, it suggests that even the most rebellious nations are not beyond God's reach. Iran's future, while currently veiled in darkness, may one day turn toward restoration and redemption. The possibility of Iran turning back to God is not beyond the realm of possibility. Just as Persia's role in the Bible went from one of redemption to one of rebellion, it could one day return to a place of grace. This is a powerful message. While the world watches Iran today, embroiled in conflict and defiance, God's plan is far more intricate. The nations that rise against Israel in the end, times will face judgment. But in the midst of this, God always leaves room for redemption. As we look at the prophecies surrounding Iran, once Persia, what we see is a nation with a deeply rooted place in God's plan. From Genesis to Revelation, Persia has played a crucial role, sometimes as a liberator and sometimes as an enemy. But the ultimate fate of Iran is not sealed in judgment alone. Even as Persia's dark alliance rises in the final days, there is hope. God's promise to restore Elam offers the possibility of redemption, even after judgment. Iran's story, much like the story of humanity, is one of rise, fall, and potential restoration. So, what does this mean for us today? As the world watches the unfolding headlines about Iran, we are reminded that God's plan continues to unfold, often in ways we cannot predict. Persia's role in biblical prophecy challenges us to reflect on the power of repentance, the grace of restoration, and the undeniable truth that God's plan, no matter how dark the road may seem, will always lead to His ultimate glory. What do you think about the role of Iran in these prophecies? Do you see signs of these ancient predictions unfolding today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like us to explore more biblical prophecies and their connection to current events, give this video a thumbs up and share it with others.